All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Welcome to Pathways to Healthcare. We wanted to start off by giving some brief introductions. Whoops. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there, of our speakers today. And while we're introducing ourselves, we just wanted to do a quick attendance run here. So if you have a smartphone or another device with you, if you can scan the QR code that's on the screen, we would appreciate that. It will just really quickly ask you for your email address, and then you can hit enter and it will say you have successfully checked in. So it's a pretty easy process. And while you are doing that, scanning the QR code and checking in, I will introduce myself. My name is Lisa Famularo. I am a career coach at the UConn Center for Career Development. My focus area is working with students specifically in the physical, life, and behavioral sciences, which does include a lot of students who have pre-health aspirations, students interested in going to med school, PA school, or otherwise. And I'm really excited to be here today as one of the facilitators of the event. And I will turn it over to my colleague to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Buller. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a career coach in the Center for Career Development. And I work really closely with the College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. So a lot of, sciences and health focused majors there. And so we are really excited to have you all here today.
Yes, thanks so much, Jess. So if you haven't had a chance to finish scanning the QR code, we'll put it back up again at the end. But for now, we're going to keep going with our additional slides. So once again, here are our introductions, our titles, our photos, because we know at a virtual event, it's hard to really get a feel for who we are. So we figured we'd put that up on a slide for you as well. But before we really dive into the content of today's session, we just want to quickly talk about becoming career ready and career competencies. So for those of you who aren't familiar with career competencies, they come from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is the professional association that we and our team belong to. And NACE, otherwise known as, defines career readiness as the ability to demonstrate core competencies that broadly prepare the college educated for success in the workplace and lifelong career management. In simpler terms, becoming career ready is the development of and articulation of these 8 competencies that you see here on the screen, which have been identified by employers as essential for career success. We have a lot of great resources on our website, which is career.uconn.edu, to help you identify your competency levels and ways to further develop them. But we'll also mention that attending today's Pathways to Healthcare event is an excellent way to further build your career and self-development, communication, professionalism, and technology competencies, because those are all things we're going to be talking about and or using today. We can also meet with you one-on-one to talk about additional ways to enhance your competencies, but those are definitely the ones that are kind of the focus of today. So to give you a little bit of a preview of how this event is going to run, we're going to start off by having a moderated alumni panel, which is kind of the feature element of today's event, which will be moderated by Jess in just a second. Then we're going to move into a presentation, very brief, about Career Center resources and occupational information for specifically related to healthcare for those of you who are interested in pursuing that field. And then lastly, we are going to have a chance for you to chat in smaller breakout rooms with our alumni guests today if you're interested. Not required, but we know that some of you will have individual questions for our alums. We want to make sure that we have a chance to provide that opportunity for you. And lastly, before I turn it over to Jess to get us started, just want to reiterate the purpose of today's event. So Pathways to Healthcare is an event that we've been running, I believe, for 5 or 6 semesters now. It's been a while. And the main reason is because we get the question all the time of, I really want to work in healthcare, or I really want to work in medicine, but I don't want to go to med school, or I don't think I'm going to get into med school, or it's just, it's not part of my plan for whatever reason. And so every semester we bring in an awesome panel of alum who still have really meaningful and impactful careers in the healthcare industry, who aren't in med school or didn't go to med school, at least yet. And they're going to be able to share their stories with you today. So I'm pumped about it. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jess to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lisa. So I just want to share that we do have some additional information in an event program. And so we will be putting that in the chat. I'm doing that right now. So you can all see that if you want to read the full extensive bios for all of our panelists. We will be moving into an alumni panel now, as Lisa mentioned. So we're going to learn more from the alumni who we have here today. So you will see 4 names up here on our slide, but I do want to note that 2 of our panelists are unable to be here today. So there's a chance that we will have one of them, Fasiha, join us later, but the other one, Anna, will not be able to join us. And we have information on ways to connect with Anna in our program, the link of which I put in the chat. But that being said, I am going to kind of kick things off by having each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we will really get into the discussion. So Meryl, would you be willing to just introduce yourself? Obviously your name, your current role and company, and then we will go from there. So just those 2 things, name, current role, and company.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meryl Pukatu, and I'm currently a patient advocate serving with the National Health Corps in Philadelphia.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then Anjani.
Hi, I'm Anjani Villa. I am a clinical trial management system business analyst at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Anjani, would you be willing to give us a quick overview of what it is that you do? It doesn't have to be that quick if you want to go into a little bit of detail, but what you do and what you studied at UConn.
Sure. Can I give a quick overview of my career progression?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So I am a class of 2010 at UConn. I studied biological sciences. I did change my major a couple of times before I landed on it because it was my exploration for as to how I want to go into med school, which way to go into med school, what I wanted to study. So I was part of School of Agriculture before I even went into CLAS. I studied nutrition for a couple of semesters, and then I did molecular cell biology for a couple of semesters, and then finally I landed on biological sciences because I think that allowed me to have very broad range of different classes I could take. I was very much interested in genetics and forensic science and different. I liked a lot of things, so it was really hard for me to narrow down into one. But through that program, I was able to take clinical trials and clinical research intro classes. So that kind of kick-started my career. And I was one of those people who I liked sciences. I loved everything about it, wanted to be in healthcare, but did not want to go to med school. So I think that was a big pivotal moment in my life to decide and to tell my parents I'm not going to med school. And then it was a question of now, what do I do with this? What do I do with a science degree? So I was in different labs working on very basic science stuff, working PhD students, help their experiments in a couple of labs at UConn. And then I also got into the intro to clinical translation research class, and it was a 1 credit class at that time, and me and 5 other of my friends, I want to say colleagues, but my peers, we all took that class, and that by end of the semester the class turned into a 4 credit class because it was so intense, and we had the opportunity to go into Connecticut Children's Medical Center to volunteer, shadow, observe, conduct clinical research in the pediatric emergency department there. So that kind of really kickstarted my career, and I loved everything about it. And I took that class after the first semester. I took it second semester as a independent class, then ended up taking it 2 more times, did 2 theses with that class. I was pretty much my senior year, my last semester ended up being just that class, I'm taking multiple times. So that was definitely exciting. And that kind of led me to be in the clinical research coordinator role. So I was starting as an assistant, associate, coordinator 1, 2, 3 levels, then ended up in like research associate level. And then life happened. I needed a better work-life balance. And then I had an opportunity. I was offered to be in the administrative role as a business analyst because we're getting a new clinical research application that we needed to implement in our organization. So I had that opportunity to kind of help implement it at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And that is where I am right now. And in my current role, I lead a team of 4 analysts, and we work on various enterprise projects to make clinical research conduct to be efficient and doable. So we do and we support all of the hospitals. So we support all divisions, fetal surgery, critical care, emergency room, like every, all of CHOP. That's what I do right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Meryl, to kind of bring the same questions over to you, talk a little bit about your experience at UConn, your major, any kind of impactful classes, things like that influenced your career journey, and then more in detail about what you are currently doing in your role today.
So I graduated UConn last May, and I double majored in physiology and neurobiology and psychology. I was a STEM scholar in the honors program, so that program really gave me a lot of cool opportunities, like being able to network with other people who are STEM scholars and to be part of that community. I would say that I think one of the biggest impacts that was made on me at UConn was Dr. Jeffrey Tanner's enhanced human anatomy and physiology class. I knew I wanted to be a doctor ever since I was younger, but that class, it was just so cool. And he was the one actually that told me about AmeriCorps because I believe beginning of my junior year, I wanted to go ask him for a recommendation letter for medical school. And at that time I was planning on going directly to medical school from UConn. But I remember that he took a couple of gap years teaching English to kids in India. And I was like, you know what, that's really cool. Let me ask him about that. And so in our conversation, he told me that you don't have to go overseas to do anything meaningful. There are so many things to do here domestically. And so he told me about AmeriCorps, and that just kind of started turning a lot of gears in my head and my heart about what I really want to accomplish with myself. And so I decided to take a gap year before medical school. I am a current applicant in the 21 to 22 cycle. And so I was between a couple of programs, but the one I landed on was National Health Corps in Philadelphia. And so I serve as a patient advocate, and in my program, I help people who don't have insurance or who are low income get access to really expensive medications like insulin. And so I am the point person between the patient and the prescriber and the pharmaceutical company. And a lot of my position is advocating for patients so that they could get medicine, because we all know how expensive that could be. And another cool thing about National Health Corps is that every month we have member training days. And so that has been really insightful. I've learned so much about trauma-informed care, cultural humility, social determinants of health. And it's been super cool so far, and I'm very grateful for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Would you be willing, Meryl, just as a follow-up, to talk about what was the application process like for working with the National Health Corps?
So I applied, I want to say they open applications in April, and with AmeriCorps, or with the National Health Corps, I should say, they really want to make sure that you want this position, because we do get paid based on the poverty level of the area. And so you're not making a lot of money, and it's a way for you to relate more with the people that you are serving. And so all that's to say, I had 5 interviews. I submitted my application, I think mid-April. There are several different host sites. So I applied to Philadelphia, but there's one in San Francisco and Chicago, Florida. There's a new one in Delaware. And so I applied to the one in Philadelphia. And so the questions that they asked were just basically about your background, why AmeriCorps, why do you want to serve for 10 months of your life full time? And so they just really want to know your motivations for that. And so that was my first interview, which lasted about 45 minutes to an hour. And then I had a conversation, which I thought was another interview. That was more so they can narrow down what positions I would be interested in or would be a good fit for in Philadelphia, because that was the host site that I chose. And then after that, I'm part of the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. So I interviewed with 2 people from the ambulatory health services in PDPH, and then they kind of narrowed down even further to a specific host site that I'm at. So I had an interview over the phone with the clinical director at Health Center 10, which is a health center that I'm at right now. But there are other positions available. Like I have a friend working with chronic diseases division of Temple Health. And so she's working on preventing stroke and high blood pressure there. And so her interview process looked a little differently. It's a lot of narrowing down and just really making sure that you are dedicated and you are committed to serving this patient population.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about that. Before I jump into our next kind of set of questions, I did just want to say to everyone here in the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Obviously, you will have that breakout room time at the end if you want to ask one-on-one questions. But if you have any questions that you want to hear both perspectives at the same time, or you think might benefit the broader group, definitely feel free to put those in the chat and I will make sure that we get to them. So you can either just put them out there for everyone to see, or you can send them directly to me, and I'm happy to ask that anonymously. So just wanted to say that you can put them in there at any time. So the next question that I want to ask, and Anjani, we'll start with you on this one, is how relevant is your current work to your undergraduate major, but also was the work that got you to your current work? And I know you mentioned having multiple majors and, kind of struggling to narrow it down, but how did you become interested, I guess, before that one class that gave you that clinical experience? How did you become interested in wanting to pursue the field?
I need a minute to think about that. No, I think I got lucky. I got super lucky. And I think more than the classes that I have taken, I think it's the community. It's like finding that mentor. Sharon Rush was my advisor at that time. Dr. Arlene Albert was my mentor, when I was taking MCV classes, but also part of my clinical research pathway. Sharon Smith at Connecticut Children's Medical Center really shaped up. And when I graduated, she offered me a job. And I actually said no because I was in a public health program at the time. I didn't think I could do master's and the work at the same time. And she said, no, take classes at night, work for me in the morning. I'm like, what? So, I mean, it's definitely my mentors who kind of push me, but I think you have to allow yourself to be shaped by them, definitely ask questions and definitely be vulnerable, be like, I don't know what I'm doing, help me. And they will help, they will definitely, if you're willing to put your foot forward to be helped, they will help you. I think that's what shaped me. I have different professors. I think I'm forgetting the professor's name, but when I was taking genetics classes and forensics classes, that totally fascinated me. I could totally saw myself as going into that pathway into forensic sciences, working for Department of Public Health, I always, I was like, oh, I would work for an FBI looking at criminal records and like carbon copy. So I definitely had a different pathway too. But I think it, taking various classes helped me figure out what excites me. And I think that's so important because, yeah, everybody thinks they have this, and including myself, like, I think there's this dream pathway because this one looks cool or someone else did it looks really cool. But I think like you exploring yourself and what excites you in those classes and what specific topics excite you. Like, for the longest time, I'm very like type A, very precise person. So I loved lab work. But then after working in a particular lab for, I think, a full semester, and then the end of it, when I was presenting to the PI, the results, found out the samples I was using were contaminated, which I was like, 4 months of work just down the drain. That like totally demotivated me. But it was at the same time I was in the clinical research and I loved the patient interaction, and I knew I wanted that in my life. I need to hear people's stories, meet people, and then like I hate being bored. I need to be challenged continuously. I can't just do one thing like every day. So then clinical trials made more sense to me. So I moved in that direction. And I remember when I moved, and then life happened. I had to move to Pennsylvania, and when I moved, I was like looking at, let me, this is my opportunity going to forensics now. Like this is my second opportunity. So let me explore that. But I still, in the end, ended up sticking with clinical research.
Awesome. A follow-up to that, and Meryl, we'll bring this one to you as well after. But both of you already have mentioned mentors and people who have impacted your journey. For someone who might be hoping to build that kind of relationship with someone, have that guidance, I guess, what advice do you have, and what did you do from kind of that student perspective to create and foster that relationship with the faculty or other people on campus?
Sure. I think like if there's a class, if there's a certain topic you really liked during lecture, go to the professor during office hours or email and be like, I really enjoyed this. Ask them like, I'm currently looking for career options. If I'm really excited, like what, in your opinion, what do you think this could lead to? And just start a conversation from there, right? And then you can even ask them like, can you put me into, some professors are still in touch with, like, and they have, master's degree students, PhD students underneath them. So ask them like, can you put me in touch with somebody that I can talk to? Just, start a conversation and go from there.
Any thoughts to add to that, Meryl?
I was literally going to say office hours too. Like that's just everything for developing relationships, and also trying to participate in class if the opportunity allows for it, so that like the professor recognizes your face as someone who participates in class. And office hours is just, I'm a push that. Yeah.
Awesome. I think, having similar responses from both of you really does just demonstrate how important it is to pursue those office hours and make those connections, because we are less than half an hour in, and both of you have already talked multiple times about the impact of a network and mentors. So I think that's definitely an important thing to focus on. To ask you that same other question, Meryl, how relevant to your major is the work that you're doing right now as a patient care advocate? And what you mentioned, wanting to be a doctor for as long as you can remember, but as you got older, as you started to pursue more substantial studies, what continued to influence that?
I would say that my service is super relevant, more to the psychology major. So going into UConn, I was a physiology and neurobiology major. And then I added on a psychology major my sophomore year because physiology and neurobiology, you just get so like zoomed into like one specific pathway like at a time, and it's very like molecular level stuff, but psychology was like individual level stuff. So I thought those both went hand in hand. And what I'm doing with the National Health Corps now, it's like population level if that makes sense. Like I'm helping immigrants, I'm helping people of low socioeconomic statuses. And it's basically applying what I learned from my psychology classes now. It's like basically you learn theory during your 4 years, and now I get to like really see how it works in the real world. And I'm very grateful for this experience before medical school, when it's kind of back to that like physiological mechanisms, like zooming in again, so that you have a better understanding of the person as a whole. So yes, did I answer all of your question?
Yes, you did. Actually, no, you didn't. You answered the first part. It was a two-parter. So you answered the first part perfectly. And then how did you become interested in the field?
I honestly chose a physiology and neurobiology major because I thought it sounded cool. I'm gonna be very honest. And then after my first year, it was just general bio stuff. And I remember that I liked psychology. And so I took, I think, 1 or 2 classes of like general psychology. And so I decided to proceed forth with that. And so, yeah, what I'm doing now, I guess it's just a macro level of what I learned at UConn. And so it's relevant.
Awesome. Anjani, you want to add additional thoughts to
Sure.
that?
Right now, like I think more about it, there were definitely a few classes that structured and made me successful in my roles in like either in clinical research, in various levels. I think epidemiology classes, stats till to this day, 10 years or 12 years post like graduation, I'm still use it very regularly and need it for data analysis. It doesn't matter if you're in the sciences or if you're going to business and or administration, whatever. I think how to analyze data, how to pick out good data versus bad data is so important in so many roles. So if there's an opportunity for you to take a stats class or epidemiology class, do it now and really get into it, because I think that is such a skill set to have. And you know, the other thing that it's not class related, but I think really helped me in my career is actually my student labor jobs, my administrative jobs, picking up the phone calls for the dean's office. I worked in School of Pharmacy in the dean's office for at least 2-3 years, and then worked in family therapy office for a couple of years. And like me just calling and confirming appointments, how to talk professionally, how to like respond, you know, in a dean's office, get calls from all over the places. How do you respond to those, or how to connect them to the right places? I used to help maintain the School of Pharmacy's like website, like those some smaller skills, like some small technical skills, like really help. I think my biggest asset was how to fix printers in my first job. Like that was such a skill, but like that gets you to be where you are. And like learning how to take good notes, being organized, you know, being organized is so important. And we hire, you know, I trained so many coordinators just out of college, just like willing to take meeting notes. I remember being in one of these, you know, sessions in undergrad, and someone telling me like, be the person who volunteered to meetings, and that is still stuck in my head like 15 years later. So like, be that person, because that's how you're going to like people like value you, and that you're there to like, you know, you know, we talked about career competencies, right? Professionalism, like teamwork and communication, and that's how we're going to demonstrate via action. So take those small opportunities to be like, hey, I'm here, I'm serious about what I'm doing, and like get me there. I think that's how you can show in different actions. I know a lot of people kind of shy away to be like, oh, let me just like observe, which is also fine, right? But like, I think you have to put some actions at some point, and like volunteering to do these, like, you know, taking meeting notes. And like, even if you don't understand, especially in medical, like everyone uses abbreviations, which no one knows what each other is talking about, especially coming in new. But like taking that notes and asking your peer, like, hey, I said DCS, what does that mean? What is NHC fully? What does that mean? Like just type it in, and then like asking your mentor, your you know, your manager, or another peer. I think those are so like as equally important as any of those classes you're being taught. So I definitely appreciated my student labor jobs very much.
Okay, sorry, it would not let me unmute. Those are excellent points, and honestly bring me to my next question, which is related to kind of more broad transferable skills. So some of the things that both of you talked about in your classes and more technical skills are so important. But additionally, and going back to the whole notion of competencies, we know that on top of those technical area specific skills, employers are also looking for more broad transferable skills, communication, leadership, teamwork, just to name a couple of the very, very many. And so what skills or abilities or kind of characteristics of yourself would you say are essential to your success or have been essential to your success that others might be able to start implementing or work on if they haven't done, or really lean into if those are also strengths of theirs? And Meryl, we can start with you on this one.
I would say that service orientation is definitely important. Because this gap year with National Health Corps in Philadelphia, we don't say we work, we say that we serve, because it is like technically volunteering. And so service orientation is super important also for like graduate health programs. They are looking for people who enjoy serving others. Being compassionate too. I'm not sure if that counts as a skill, but compassion, empathy, kindness is so important, I think, in anything that you do. And also diligence. I think this diligence was something that was fostered in me at UConn through my extracurriculars, because I would have to manage, I was a president of 2 student organizations, so I would have to manage meetings, like make sure that everything is done on time, teamwork, by working with your e-boards and collaborating with other people. So yeah, service orientation, kindness, compassion, diligence, time management, all of those are very important for me, I would say.
Anjani?
Sure. So to add to that, I think working in healthcare and hospitals, and it could be like very intimidating. So knowing when to be empathetic, like, yeah, you have a task you need to do, but the doctor is running, like, do you run behind them to get that signature, or do you give them that space? There are times where I like stood outside OR waiting for that, attending to finish a surgery so that I can finish my, I need to submit this abstract for you. I will wait outside, but you have to balance that, and when to be proactive, when to be like, okay, let me give that space. That goes with compassion and empathy. And I think professionalism, teamwork is very, very important, and how to communicate constantly. Communication. I think communication is a skill that I didn't value so much until I was in work field. Then I was like, oh, okay, well, I need to let all these people know. And to be organized, I think is also very, very valuable.
Can you, Anjani, talk a little bit about your current work environment? Also, if you want to touch upon it, when you were doing more of the clinical research, but what that work environment is like. Is there such a thing as a typical day in the life? If so, what does that look like? If not, I guess how do things differ? Are there general trends that you see? That type of thing.
Sure. So I'll speak on both of my roles because I think it's important. So when I was in the clinical settings, there's no typical day, especially when I worked in the ED. I think it was it was fun when there's other concerts happening at Hartford to go see, because I'm like, oh, it's like how does that fit with like pediatrics and stuff? It was very, very interesting to see that. And I think after that I worked in, I think I had more stable time in when I worked at Penn and mood and anxiety disorders. So it was all my patient of subset that I seen was people who were experiencing depression and anxiety. So that skill set is very much like patients and like guiding them, helping them like make sure you take your medication. How do you like keep them accountable? How do you keep a patient accountable so they can be better? But it's just their mental state is that. So how do you provide care? So I think that place I really had to like mellow down a lot, where I went from like ED being like fast, like and all the time to like, all right, let's everybody chill. Okay, let's okay, and then like really counseling and like learning there. And then from there moved to fetal surgery, again another fast pace. Every like patient comes last minute from all over the country, all over the world. How do you counsel them? There's some treatments or surgeries they can only participate if they're part of their research project itself. So like that's a very difficult situation. These are moms who are pregnant and their either kid is having some kind of birth defect or some kind of a pregnancy, medical issue that needs to get resolved. Sometimes they need a surgery the very next day, and they're here like not knowing. They come to Philly, we get them. So it's a very emotional state. So that's also again like learning to know when to say what, and empathy. Again, empathy is going to be a big highlight, I guess, today. And like understanding them, understand their situation as like, okay, do they have kids at home that like they need to tell what's happening? It is living in that COVID world before COVID, where you have to like, you feel that isolation, but like helping them kind of get through it. And I follow with them like I have projects that I follow them very long term. So they get a surgery here, in utero surgery. And then they get discharged home, they deliver at home. And then I have to make sure like they delivered and how was the delivery. And then calling them like 6 months later, how are the kids? And or like, calling them for a 2 to like 3 year follow-up project. And sometimes it is hard because you don't know, like, a lot could happen in 2 years. And how do you call and be like, hey, what's up? Like, how's it going? And then, there's this we call survivorship call. Like, it's literally to see like, did your pregnancy survive? Like, it's very difficult, right? And sometimes it could be a trigger. You call them like, hey, I'm so and so from Children's Hospital Philadelphia, like, and then sometimes people hang up on you, and you have to respect that there's nothing personal. A parent, the word or something triggered them. You have to understand that. You have to figure out to get that information some other avenue. So I think that was making the phone calls always gets me very nervous because I never know like how what kind of experience they're having. But it was probably the most fulfilling for me in terms of like my career pathways, because I think that particular position, I had to have all of my data in such an organized way. And that's why I'm kind of emphasizing analysis and stuff. So I changed my database like 6 different times. So like I can spit out data and like have a meaningful way to explain that to a patient. Like, and I can have an attending text me saying like, hey, we had this diagnosis, how many diagnoses did we see in here? And because we see such a rare amount of like patient certain diagnosis, I can like quickly look at my database and be like, okay, we had 6 patients, 3 had the surgery, 3 had this one, this is how that data like deliveries went, and be able to text them back. So they are in a room with the patient to explain that. So you have to be very, very methodical on how you structure your data and all that. So that was that's definitely something I wanted to share. And coming into my new administration role is also kind of similar, but the stress is not, there's a patient, I need to get this thing for them, so they need to make a decision. This is more like, all right, if I don't get this logistics like set up, there's going to be some major ripple effect in just the business flow at the hospital. And I think a day-to-day is pretty much you get new protocols, new clinical trials. Like, you could get like the COVID study, the immunization vaccination study in pediatrics. We have one of them. How do you set it up logistically? Where is the vaccine coming? How is that getting dispensed? How are the patients being recruited? How are they getting informed consent? Who is making their choices? How are there's a certain number of visits they need to come to the hospital for, so we can keep track of their side effects and all that stuff before we give that data to the sponsor, to the FDA. We can have like studies that are investigator initiated within the hospital, like they're trying this new device or a new drug. How do we get this into a place where it could be like submitted to FDA to even start a clinical trial. So it's a lot of logistics in that point. But have me like working in the clinical field to understand how that works helps me like advocate for certain workflows. So one of the systems that we did major impact in our hospital, I was grateful to have the background that I have, so I can influence that the workload to be efficient to in the clinical setting. Yeah, there's never a same day, but, but it's fun, it's exciting, it's new, and I wouldn't want the same thing to happen every day, so it kind of fits.
Yeah, absolutely. Meryl, can you talk about your work environment, and then also, is there a same day? And again, if not, are there consistencies that you do see or kind of routines that you are noticing kind of continue to occur?
So I work at I serve at Health Center 10, and it is a federally qualified health center. And so I serve alongside with nurses and physicians. And because my health center is one of the busiest in the city, we do have another National Health Corps member that comes in on Wednesdays and Fridays. So we have our own little office because we have to use a computer for literally everything. And so organization is very important. And data, I just use an Excel sheet to like make sure I know what I'm faxing out when I'm faxing out. And so the work environment, it is different between health centers. Some health centers are a bit more laid back because they don't have as much volume of patients. And so that was the way it kind of was during COVID. But now that like the weather's getting warmer, COVID restrictions in Philadelphia, we're in the all clear phase right now. It was announced last Wednesday. And so things are just kind of dying down now. And so the environment at Health Center 10, it could be kind of tense sometimes because there's a lot of patients because we are the only health center in the Northeast Philadelphia area. But for patient advocate stuff, we don't really have a schedule of when patients could come in, like really like we're there to serve them. And so they can come in at their convenience. So it's kind of like putting out little fires as they come up one at a time. So usually I guess like there is no day-to-day, but the skeleton of my week is usually Mondays. I'll place refills for patients. And so that's calling pharmaceutical companies, making sure that they have the right patient information, dosage information, and that they ship to the provider's office. So that could take up to a couple of hours, because if you've ever been on a phone call with like an insurance company or some sort of big company, it takes a while. And so part of me is that's something that I also respect about the position, because we're doing this so that the patients don't have to, and so that the patients can focus on their jobs and their kids and like all the other stressors that they have. And so I value like standing in the gap by making all these phone calls. And so phone calls is one of them, managing the faxes that come in so that the prescribers don't have to. And this kind of goes back to what Anji was saying about communication, because you have to make sure that everyone is on the same page about a patient's dosage information, or else things could go awry. And so, yeah, Monday is usually just like processing refills, and the rest of the week is calling patients in case they need to come in for re-enrollment applications, because usually their enrollment in a patient assistance program is for 1 year, where they could get medication for free or at a reduced cost. And so usually like my time is filled up with putting out those little fires, like making sure that I'm answering the prescribers questions if they have any, like, oh, is this medicine eligible for a patient assistance program? Is this patient eligible based on their insurance status, income status? yeah, and so that's what I do at the health center. But with the National Health Corps, we're also divided into different committees. So there's the service committee, professional development committee, recruitment committee, so getting more people into the National Health Corps. I am with the training committee, and so we meet weekly to discuss what we want to train on as a cohort. And so we bring in speakers from organizations throughout Philadelphia to talk. So I was in charge of getting someone from the Maternity Care Coalition to talk about reproductive justice and the history of reproductive justice in the US. We just had a speaker talk about legal services for immigrants and what insurance could look like for them. We had a training on services for the elderly and the disabled. And so the position itself at the health center is just a part of what I do as a National Health Corps member. There are other members who do outside service. So I volunteer at a local food pantry to get some more hours to meet the 1,700 hour requirement for the AmeriCorps service term. So yeah, I would say like there's a weekly rhythm, but maybe not so much day-to-day rhythm.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. This question is similar kind of at the macro level, but a little bit different for each of you. So Anjani, when you were getting ready to graduate from UConn, where did you look for entry-level healthcare positions? I guess, what was that kind of job search experience? What was that like for you?
Sure. Again, I got super lucky. I didn't apply for any jobs. It was offered to me. But when I moved to Pennsylvania, when I had to start search, I think I, looked everywhere, and then I got overwhelmed by looking everywhere because I felt like I was looking at the same position in multiple websites. So I think if I have any recommendation, if you have a place that you're targeting, definitely watch those with the hawk, definitely going into I know when I moved to Pennsylvania, my mentor at CCMC told me only work at CHOP. I'm like, okay. So then I was only looking at CHOP websites and positions. But I think just LinkedIn has been a great help. I know recently Indeed, I think there's so many websites, but I think the thing that really helped me is actually focusing on certain hospitals, or any large hospitals around me. Then I kind of focused on them when I first moved here.
Awesome. And Meryl, I know you mentioned your professor's recommendation of AmeriCorps, but were there other resources you were looking at or other programs that you were considering or applying to simultaneously with the National Health Corps application, knowing kind of how intense it was, or was that the only place you looked?
So the National Health Corps is just one program of AmeriCorps in general. And so Dr. Tanner suggested AmeriCorps in general. So I was looking at several different programs. I was interested in Boston Healthcare for the Homeless. There were a couple of programs in Connecticut that was also super cool. Some of them were to manage pipelining high school students to STEM careers and to careers in healthcare. And there was also another program in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And it was basically working with at-risk families. And so I was very interested in the adverse childhood experiences ACE test. It was something we learned about in psychology. And so that program in New Bedford was a way to, lessen the risk of a high ACE score for children in families who are suffering from homelessness, poverty, food insecurity. And I landed with the National Health Corps in Philadelphia because it was closer to my family. I'm from New Jersey. And I thought it was more well-rounded, especially given the trainings on being trauma-informed and cultural humility and social determinants of health. I thought that was just more geared towards what I wanted to do as a physician.
And can I piggyback on that? I remember in one of my very early mistakes is when I moved to Pennsylvania looking for jobs, I was looking for a job title. And then, after like a month into it is when I realized I was looking for the wrong job title. So that was because each organization kind of names it their own. So I think like knowing the career ladder structures, I was looking for a research associate position, which I didn't know was more advanced than a coordinator, which I still need to be in entry level kind of positions. So then looking at either research assistant or research coordinator were more appropriate for my for my background at that point. So I think that was like, oh, well, no wonder no one's calling me because I'm not qualified for this.
All right. And then my next question is for you, Meryl. Can you talk about how your gap year has kind of impacted who you might be as a future physician? If it's allowed you to form new connections that will benefit you on your path and how you have formed those?
Yeah, serving with the National Health Corps, I think it just made me a more compassionate person. Like I thought I was kind to begin with, right? But then patients come into your office and they talk about all these things that they're going through, and it just kind of humbles you. And so I think that's something that I'm going to take away from this experience, like just to be humble and to know that like you never know what someone is going through. And like going along with that, you also don't know what situations they're in. Like it's very, very easy to be annoyed when someone's kid is screaming in the clinic, or it's very easy to be annoyed when they're running late. And what the National Health Corps has taught me through the trainings is that like these people, like they're living in poverty. They are like working multiple jobs, like trying to raise kids, but like, insurance might not work, but they might be on disability. And so basically, like, all it's to say, like, I just learned more about the problems that people are facing in an urban setting, which was kind of a stark contrast to what I was facing at UConn. It was Cowtown there, right? Let's be honest. And then I grew up in suburban New Jersey, like middle class. And so serving with the National Health Corps has just made me realize like how humble you have to be to serve other people and for them to be seen by you. And that is something that I hope to carry as a physician, hopefully, so that I'm able to create relationships with my patients and they can trust me, and that I could be an advocate for their health needs.
Awesome. And then Anjani, earlier you mentioned some of kind of the difficult conversations or hard settings that you have found yourself in through clinical trials. Can you talk about either kind of strategies for handling those and, not necessarily compartmentalizing, but maybe if that is a strategy, but, ways to kind of handle those amongst all of your other work that you simultaneously have to be continuing with?
Right. I think like having difficult conversation, leading with empathy first, trying to understand their situation, and then trying to explain, like share the knowledge that I have, and then like definitely like answer questions, and then trying to get the resources and support that they need. Sometimes, you can have a patient in front of you where we kind of need to have them make a decision soon, because the clock is clicking. You're only pregnant for a certain time, and the fixed time is only very little. But then how do you communicate that without putting that pressure on them? Because I'm sure it's a very stressful situation for them as well. And they would want you to talk to their entire family, so explain the same thing again to their partner, to their mom, to like whoever the family member. So I think you definitely have to actually block off your life and then be their person, because they're in a very vulnerable position and they're counting on you. They're hoping, nobody wants to go into a hospital, right? So they're there to get things fixed. So like, yes, they're here to get it fixed. No one wants a bad news, but unfortunately we give a lot of bad news. So then like, how do you explain that and still like give that respect, give that I don't know, options. Like people want options for them to select. So I think again, you really have to. One thing I learned is like how to calm yourself down and not get distracted by other things. Whether like there's a pager going off, like turn the page off, turn the phone off, and just be like, I am here. You're my patient. You're the person I'm going to help you with like everything that I know. What can I do to help you? Explain that. And again, I'm not an MD, so I still need to get the attending to come back and be like, explain these, I can explain all these things. I can answer all these questions, and these I'll find the answers for you, whether it's a genetic counselor, whether it's in another coordinator, another like an attending, another cardiologist, like I will find the resources for you. So let's go. And then at that time, organization is also important because, okay, I answered all these questions. Let's get you all of your questions answered, because, in the midst of a very chaotic, stressful moment, they will forget something. And then I know if like later on, they'll remember, oh, I never asked those questions. So like trying to just be helpful and like make that time for them. Yeah, there's sometimes a consult could be like half hour, like easy peasy, like, things. And it could be someone who came in with like, their own doctor sent them to get a better imaging here in our hospital. But little did they know they were actually here for like full consult, a full day of appointments, and they were not mentally prepared for. And then like sitting there for 3-4 hours, just explaining like what happened, what's happening, what are different options, and what does the road lead to. So like communication piece is so important. You want to be clear, you're not going to rush through anything. So talking slow and go lead with empathy. And like I think difficult conversation in like non-clinical setting is so important too. Like how do you talk to a colleague and to keep them accountable things, and I feel like I have difficult conversations often in my administrative role as well.
Yeah, I think difficult conversations happen much more frequently than we think they are going to. Absolutely. All right, so I have one more question for each of you, the same question, but wondering if you had one piece of advice to give to a student on, approaching their career outlook while they're in school, what would that be? And Meryl, we can start this one with you.
Kind of going back to what we were talking about at the earlier part of the session, I'd say go to office hours and talk to professors. Like what Anjani was saying before, like they have master's students, PhD students, they've just lived longer than you have. And so they have more life experience. They have friends who've done all sorts of things with their lives too. I think just getting to know your professors and talking to them and going to office hours is a great way to start networking. And they are just pools of information.
Anjani, any?
Sure. To piggyback on that, I think it's like expand your network. I think, when we're students, we kind of just hang out with our friends and with our our little, that smaller group. But I think like finding information outside is very important, and talking out loud about like, I like this option, or like, oh, I'm really interested in this. Where can I go from there? So yeah, piggyback and more like go to office hours, like figuring out like, I really like this lecture. Like, I want to know more about it. What can I do? Like asking, just simple questions like that can lead you to major things in your life. Like I remember, I have no idea how I even got into public health at undergrad, but I ended up again networking. I was talking to somebody and they're like, oh, can you help with this? We're starting to, we want to start a public health class at UConn in undergrad. We already have a graduate program. We're starting an undergrad. So then I got lumped up into it. So I forget this course name, but like Intro to Public Health, I was one of those people who got it started. So like, just this, it's a very cool experience, and you meet so many people doing these things outside. And I think one piece of advice I want you to have is probably explore, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and do more. Like, I danced at UConn Surya. I'm not sure if it's still a group yet, but I was one of those dancers. Just participate in groups, because you'll meet a lot of people, a lot of interesting people. So do more.
Love both of those pieces of advice. And so I just want to say thank you both so much for allowing me to ask you so many questions back to back to back. So that being said, we are going to turn it back over to Lisa for just a minute to walk us through some resources, and then we will be opening up our breakout rooms. But Lisa, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jess, and thank you to both of our wonderful panelists. We'll turn the floor back over to you in just a moment. But as Jess mentioned, I just want to kind of wrap up the formal sort of group part of our event today by going through the last section of our PowerPoint, which has to do with resources and other occupational information in the field of healthcare. So just to highlight a couple of resources, the first one that we have here is a screenshot of one of our career communities on the Center for Career Development website. Career communities, if you're not familiar with them, are industry-focused groups that assist undergraduate and graduate students in narrowing down their career aspirations into manageable and relevant fields. So we have a ton of stuff on our website, but this is a great way to look at only the stuff that's related to healthcare and wellness. They also allow faculty, staff, employers, and alumni to interact with students through specific and targeted communities by participating as mentors, writing blogs and success stories, or helping guide students to the communities that will fall within their career interests. So the one that we have a screenshot of here is the healthcare and wellness one, like I've mentioned a couple of times, but we thought that that one would be particularly of interest to students in this group. So if you go to our website, it's one of the things right on our top menu, career communities, healthcare and wellness, and then you can explore the different sections. We also have a number of affinity communities, which are a similar concept, but they're identity focused groups that provide specialized content that integrates equity and inclusion with the career development journey. And those are located right next to affinity communities. And those include things like Asian and Asian American, first generation, international students, women, undocumented students, any number of social identities are included in that section. And one of the features of the career communities that I think is particularly valuable is a feature called Job Market Insights. And this is a great tool that we partner with an external company called MC to have on our website. And it shows you real life employment data from across the country to help inform your career decision making. So when you go to this feature of the page, you can type in any keyword in the job market insight search bar and see some information about that job, whether it's employment trends, top employers, different education levels that are required, job titles that you can then take to other websites and look for positions in that field, which I know was a topic of conversation today. Lots of really great information to help you make your decision maybe about which career you want to pursue or even which geographic area is appealing to you, because I know we talked about that as well. Outside of our University of Connecticut resources, there are so many websites out there to help you explore careers in healthcare, and these are just a few of them that we have found particularly helpful and we've sort of gotten positive recommendations from students about. So the first one is explorehealthcareers.org. They have a really, really good comprehensive like occupation explorer. That's one of my personal favorites. The one below that says this is public health, that is the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. So if you decide that public health is an area of interest, that's a really great one to look at. There's healthcarepathway.com, which is another more generic one, just really broad coverage of careers in healthcare. Then on the right-hand side, we have the top one is the National Association of Advisors for the Health Professions. So that is a resource that's put together for like pre-health advisors, but also has really great information directly for students. Then the AUPHA is the Association of University Programs in Health Administration. So if you are looking more for like the sort of business side of healthcare, that's a really great one to look at. And then ONET is our final one on this slide, which is actually a government database. So definitely more broad than the rest of these, but has some of the most comprehensive data you can find when it comes to labor market information. So it's definitely one that we also recommend. All right, so I'm going to put the QR code up just one last time if you weren't able to scan it in the beginning. And I guess I will also pause for a moment to invite questions in the chat one more time if anybody has any questions for the larger group. And if not, I think we are just about ready to go into our breakout rooms. Jess, do you have anything to add before we do that?
No, I think we are good to go.
Okay, Perfect. So just a reminder, unfortunately, Anna and Fasiha were not able to join us today, but you're still more than welcome to reach out to them and chat with them for additional insight. So the link that I just put in the chat is to the Husky Mentor Network, and both Anna and Fasiha are mentors on the Husky Mentor Network. So that's a really great way to get in touch with them. So if you really were hoping to ask them questions today, you can go ahead and do that after the event. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and open up our breakout rooms. And we are going to be using the choose your own breakout room feature. So if you go ahead and look at the bottom menu of your screen, you should see a button that says breakout room, and that will bring up the menu for you. And then you can just choose the name. Rooms are named with the alum's name. So you can just choose which alum you want to speak to and then go ahead and join that room. So Anjani and Meryl, if you want to join your rooms first, and the students will join you, we can do that.